Hello, my name is Sakata, and this is my History 102 final project. I chose to do the American Civil War because it was the topic that interests me most throughout this semester, and I wanted to have this project be fun for me. My historical question was the main cause of the Southern/Confederate states losing the Civil War their lack of resources? Some background information: the American Civil War was one of the most important wars fought in American history. It lasted from 1861 through 1865 and ultimately culminated in the Union, or the Northern States' victory. There are many reasons that the South did not win this war, but throughout this project I'm going to prove that the main reason was their lack of resources. My thesis was: the main cause of the Confederate loss in the American Civil War was their lack of resources and resourcefulness. The three main reasons were: the equipment was in favor of the North since the South couldn't keep up with their production; Southern goods and communication was far less efficient and superior, meaning it took much longer to transport anything; and the low food and clothing supplies provided to the soldiers provided for low morale along the soldiers fighting. My first group was the massive equipment and technological advantage the North had over the South because of their higher industrialization directly led to the South's loss. The antebellum northern United States had become very industrialized. This was because many of the cities in the United States were in the Northeast United States, and tons of immigrants were coming over, and the workforce was unlike ever seen before. The South was still mainly rural and agricultural, with many people living off the land and struggling to provide for themselves as they were fairly poor. This meant Northerners were able to help with the war efforts more because they had more money to throw around, while the South was very little able to support their war efforts because they could barely support their own families. Northerners were typically richer, and this led to Northerners getting better education and better jobs, and engineers being 6 times as likely to be from the North than the South, which is very important during a war, especially a war like this. The first source I used was from battlefields.org, titled "The North and the South." All of these factors meant the North was already much more set up to fight a war than the South. Not only did the North have the sheer amount of equipment advantage over the South, they also had a quality advantage. Because the North had such a sheer amount of quantity advantage over the South, they were able to experiment and begin to get better quality than the South, while the South just had to focus on what worked. Throughout the war, the South struggled to give every troop and soldier what they needed. My second group was that both Southern transportation and communication had become much less superior by the time the war came around, meaning the North had much more unity and much faster relay, allowing for more coordination. In the presentation, there is a picture shown that is all the railroads along the eastern United States, what the United States was during the Civil War during 1860, and as you can see, almost all of the densely populated cities were in the northeastern United States, and tons of the railroads were around the area too. Communication often plays huge roles in wars, as we've seen throughout this class, with the Cold War between Gorbachev and Kennedy as the Cuban Missile Crisis, the American Revolution, which was caused by us declaring our independence, and the Mexico-American, which was caused by Mexico not communicating that Texas was a state. Well, telegraphing had become much more prominent in the North than the South, with the South employing 1,500 employees and the North employing 12,000. Telegraphing had become the new norm of communication and a much faster way to relay information throughout the country, which the North utilized to their advantage very well. This allowed for word to travel days faster in the North than the South. The Signal Corps became another communication job during the Civil War, which was people who were about a mile or between 5 miles and a mile away from camps who used waving of flags and torches to relay information to people away. This was very dangerous because both sides of the war knew about this job, and they were often the targets of attacks. Railroads were the most important form of transportation throughout the war, which the North used to their advantage, as shown in the picture. And the quantity and quality of train cars and railroads being produced by the North were much higher. I used 3 sources throughout this: 2 around the communications in the Civil War, Essential Civil War curriculum, and Civil War signals by the National Security Agency. And then I used How the Railroad Won the War by the Smithsonian American Arts Museum as my source about transportation. The American North was now extremely industrialized. This made the shift towards war efforts through factories and cities much easier. They immediately started ramping up production. As we've seen throughout American history with World War I and World War II, the economy was shot up because so many people were provided jobs throughout the factories to produce telegraph lines, railroads, guns, ammunition. Telegraph poles and lines began being produced at an extreme rate along with railroads and train cars, and not only did this give the immediate advantage to the North in both of these aspects, this also meant they had time and experience on their hands. As I previously mentioned, with the regular goods and services that they were able to refine their crafts because they had extra time on their hands. They had the amount of quantity, while the South was forced to continue their same industrialization, same process, because they did not have the amount of quantity to fall back on in case their experiments didn't work. Both the quantity and quality of communication and transportation fell in the North, which they utilized to win them the war through mass transportation and faster, but also tons of interference through communication. As I previously mentioned, both sides of the war knew about the Signal Corps, but the North used this to their advantage as they caught Signal Corps and they relayed information, they interfered with information many times, leading to multiple battle wins. My third and final group was without plentiful resources to go around soldier camps and throughout the military, soldiers became exhausted due to weakness from hunger, temperature, and dehydration. This caused morale on the entire South Side to go down significantly, leading towards their demise. The South was not cut out to enter a war, and the soldiers knew it. To go along with the South's lack of resources, there were also many internal conflicts throughout the Confederacy. The Confederacy was a brand new country, and many people struggled with the power dynamic, including soldiers, generals, and officials, and they all wanted control over their soldier camps, which led to bitterness throughout the camp and less unity. The lack of resources at the camps provided very hurtful to the soldiers as well. And in fact, some soldiers were so scared for their own life, they left to go to the Union, known as the Galvanized Yankees, and over 100,000 soldiers out of the original 1,000,000 who went for the Confederacy straight up left their camps and just went back home. I used the article, Why Did the South Lose the Civil War by Princeton University, which does a very good job at explaining this side of the fight as well. The article states that the invader needs to be vastly stronger and more organized than the invaded, which was not the case. Now, wars are not only won on the front lines, while they are most of the time. Behind the lines, they need to be strong and unified, and the South was anything but that. Like I said, over 100,000 soldiers left out of the original 1,000,000, which was a huge blow. And many of the soldiers were just generally disgruntled while they were still there, leading to just a weaker soldier base, even though the Confederacy was usually led by generals who were more efficient and better. The main cause of the Confederate loss in the American Civil War was their complete lack of resources. Their loss was caused by the equipment production being heavily in favor of the North, northern transportation and communication from these resources being much better, and the morale hit soldiers took from the soldiers' lack of support. I proved this by explaining how each of these aspects were important in the actual battles and how it all ultimately ended and culminated in the South's demise. So what? Why should we care about what the reason the South's loss in the Civil War was when they lost anyway, right? We shouldn't need to care. Well, there's intense division throughout not just the United States, but the entire world right now, and civil wars are bound to happen. Knowing what causes and what can win people wars is extremely important, and the lack of resources on the South side was so important to the North's success that it is not to be understated. Also, knowing the reason that the bad guys didn't win is important too. Once again, this project was enjoyable and overall a good learning experience for me. I chose the Civil War as my topic because it was the topic that interests me the most, and I was very intrigued to learn more about this year. That meant the research I needed to do throughout this project was much more fun and didn't feel like a chore because I was learning more about something I was truly interested in. I believe I met all of my standards for this project, and I'm proud of the work that I put out and this final product that I got. Having the sources only being allowed to be scholarly or primary also allowed for only the inclusion of relevant and truthful information. Thank you.